Along the coast of Albania, where the beautiful azure waters of the Ionian and Adriatic seas meet, lies the coastal city of Vlorë. In ancient times, this area was controlled by a powerful Illyrian group known as the Amantes. The Bay of Vlorë is very well protected and made a safe harbor for Greek traders traveling up and down the coast. As these traders had increasingly strong trade relationships with the local Illyrians, they began to settle the area and eventually founded the city of Ulan around the 6th century BC. It appears that this was a gradual and mutually beneficial arrangement for the Greek traders and the Amantes. The Illyrians could trade salt, silver, weapons, and timber for Greek luxury items like stylized pottery and jewelry. While there were instances of raids and conflict, by and large cooperation was the norm as Greeks and Illyrians intermarried and blended. The city was a melting pot, and both Illyrian and Greek could be heard spoken at the markets. Once the Greeks had established themselves along the coast, they began to look inland. Rapid population growth and political tensions growing in the Greek city-states to the south led to a process called apoikia, when the Greeks began to colonize areas around the Mediterranean. About 40 kilometers north of Ulan was a territory controlled by the Illyrians called Tulanti. Here they had a town called Galakia. They had a sophisticated society and funeral mounds showing elaborate burials, predating the Greek arrival by centuries. Like the Amantes to the south in Ulan, the Tulanti Illyrians wanted access to Greek goods and had their own wares to trade. They also had something very important to the seafaring Greeks, a substance called bitumen. This is a natural asphalt tar that is extremely important for waterproofing ship hulls and for use as a glue. While the details of the transformation of Galakia to Apollonia are vague, one possibility is that the city had been experiencing depopulation and that there was conflict with the Amantes to the south over the important bitumen mines. As the story goes, the local officials may have invited the Greeks from Corinth and Corcyra to repopulate the city and establish a permanent trading post there. In the year 588 BC, under a commander named Gylax, the Greeks established themselves in the city. They began to build it out and exert control. Unlike Ulan to the south, where there was considerable intermixing between the locals and the colonists, here in Apollonia they seem to have stayed more segregated. It wasn't as much of a melting pot like Ulan, but instead a layered society. Here, in the Bouleuterion, also known as a monument of Aganothetes, the wealthy elites of the city would make the decisions that would affect all aspects of how the city was governed in a top-down manner. The interior had an amphitheater-like seating design to accommodate the dignitaries and their debates. Aristotle wrote of Apollonia as an oligarchy rather than a Greek democracy. He informs that the city's government was controlled by a small group of Greeks and their descendants that ruled over the population, including the local Illyrians that had presumably invited them there. Those whom identified as Greek would have the land and important offices, whereas those whom identified as Illyrian would work as craftsmen and farmers. In a scheme that would anticipate Ottoman rule millennia later, where they would require adoption of Turkish custom to access upper society, we see the prelude to this here. There are indications that some of the local Illyrians adopted Greek customs in order to assimilate to their colonizers and advance in society, a pattern we see repeated throughout history. There is, however, also evidence that the Greeks integrated Illyrian earth cults into the worship of Artemis and Apollo in order to appease the locals. The economy of Apollonia was strong throughout its existence. It had a near monopoly on that all-important bitumen. They had massive agricultural exports of grain, olive oil, and wine, and on a darker note, they were also involved in the slave trade. The commercial importance of the city through its life is evidenced through its reach, as Apollonian coins have been found as far away as Romania and Hungary. During the First Illyrian War, an Illyrian queen named Teuta was expanding her power, which threatened Greek and Roman trade. When the Romans showed up at Apollonia, they were welcomed as liberators. Because of their cooperation, when the Romans took control of the area, they granted Apollonia the status of civitas libera et immunis, or a free and immune city. This meant that Apollonians could keep their laws and, more importantly, didn't have to pay taxes to Rome. Because of the great wealth and relative safety of Apollonia, It eventually became a sort of university town, with schools of Stoic and Epicurean philosophy and an extensive library. These resources attracted some of the young elite of Roman society, including an 18-year-old young man named Octavian. While he was studying in Apollonia, a messenger arrived with terrible news. His beloved uncle, a consul named Julius Caesar, had been stabbed to death by Roman senators. Here in Apollonia, young Octavian decided he would return home to collect his inheritance, the entire Roman Empire. He and the allies of Caesar defeated the senatorial armies under Pompey, Cato, Cassius, and Brutus, and then defeated their former ally Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Octavian then took absolute power, became the first emperor of Rome, and was honored with the name Caesar Augustus. Julius Caesar himself was a consul with dictatorial powers, but was never technically emperor. I know this could be a point of confusion for some people. Now the Roman Republic was gone, and Augustus ushered in a new imperial tradition as imperator that would last until the fall of Constantinople in 1453. As the Roman Empire entered into what we call the Byzantine period, the city was rocked by several massive earthquakes in the 3rd and 4th centuries CE. This changed the course of the important Vjosa River and silted in the harbor, turning it into a malarial swamp. Slowly, the once large population of 60,000 withered away and headed to places like Vlorë. It would linger on as a monastic center with a small population that moved to the more defensive Acropolis. In the year 1250, construction on a monastery would be started. This would be the Monastery of St. Mary that was built right in the heart of the old city. The monastery was constructed from the city itself on the foundations of an earlier basilica and likely an ancient building before that. They used what's called spolia for construction. Stones and columns were taken from ancient buildings and the theater to build the monastery. Basically, it is a Christian structure that is built from the bones of paganism. Many elements of the pagan past can still be seen in the building. The church itself is constructed in the standard Byzantine cross and square design. Slowly, the few remaining people of the city disappeared, and eventually there'd be nothing left but the monks. When the Ottomans took control of the area, they more or less left the monastery alone and focused on Vlorë. In the 19th century, the monastery in ruins became a famous stop for tourists like Lord Byron, and the monks would provide accommodation and food for the travelers. The final end of monastic life at the monastery would come in 1967 during the reign of dictator Enver Hoxha. Like all religious sites in Albania, Muslim and Christian, the monastery was closed and the monks were expelled. Some were sent to labor camps and they were all forced to lead secular lives. Fortunately, despite many churches and mosques being destroyed or just left to crumble, the monastery was spared and used to house the many artifacts from the city. That purpose continues, as the complex is now a protected cultural monument and serves as a well-curated museum full of statues and artifacts. The church itself has been restored and maintained. It is still occasionally used for religious services during special religious events like feast days, weddings, and baptisms. If you should find yourself in Albania, in the cities of Vlorë or Fier, this site is a must-see in my opinion. It makes for a wonderful day of wandering through the ruins in the monastery. And may I suggest you bring a picnic, because this is a really nice spot for something like that. I hope you have enjoyed my history of Apollonia, and that my short documentary enhances your understanding and joy if you decide to visit. If you did, please like and subscribe to the channel. I really enjoy producing these mini documentaries for you, and your support really helps. There are also links to buy me a coffee and to my Patreon in the description. The Patreon has a free membership and options for paying membership if you find yourself so inclined to support the channel that way. Every little bit helps allow me to keep making researched and educational content on history and nature here. Again, I really appreciate your viewership, and thanks again for watching. Mira Popsham.